So considering some of the things we've looked at this week with this particular text, reminding ourselves that we're dealing with representation and text, and so we must concern ourselves at all times with the nature of the language and the nature of the way in which the text engages the reader. And also the key to the rubric, which is individuals and their relationship with the environment. So yesterday we talked about, or at least on Wednesday, we talked about this particular sequence, which is from the chapter on curiosity. And I started with this particular section here, and we can see the highlighted bit. It says, for Humboldt, the question had been, why are there regional variations in nature? Now we're talking about the fact that Humboldt was a man who climbed this mountain, Mount Chimborazo, which at the time was considered to be the highest peak in the world. Now knowing, of course, that it is indeed very much the furthest peak from the centre of the earth, in that it is close to the equator. It is certainly not the highest peak above sea level. But however, it is still very much the pointiest part of earth, if you put it that way. And in the 1800s, this area is in Peru, so it's an exotic part of the world. This Humboldt climbs this mountain, and climbing this mountain, we get this. On reaching base camp below Mount Chimborazo, Humboldt washed his feet, had a short siesta, and almost immediately began writing his Essai sur la géographie des plantes, in which he defined the distribution of vegetation at different heights and temperatures. He stated that there were 6 altitude zones from sea level to 3,000 feet approximately. Palms and Pasang plants grew. Up to 4,900 feet, there were ferns, and up to 9,200 feet, oak trees. Then came a zone that nurtured the evergreen shrubs, and so it goes. And we get the image here of Géographie des Plantes Equinox Axialis from Alexander von Humboldt and Amy Bonpland's Tableau Physique des Andes et Poiersboisen, 1799 to 1803. That's a bit of a mouthful. But you get the descriptions. Now, this is scientific curiosity. And it's interesting that the different types of the curious nature of the way man or an individual experiences the world around them. Here we get the experience in a very organised framework, which is first and foremost one of the ways in which we engage with our natural environment through the curious mind. The importance, as de Botton suggests, to having the right question to ask of the world. So he gives us a sense of our position against the natural state. Goes on, and then I've highlighted this bit here because I like this sequence, because what we get is a sequence of questions. We also have next to it a photo of the Iglesia de San Francisco el Grande, which is a church, of course. So for Humboldt, the question had been, why are there regional variations in nature? That's Humboldt's question. And he gives us this question had been. For Humboldt, his question was. For Humboldt, this is how he felt. But for a person in a different circumstance, they might go through the same frame of process. And what he refers to, as the chain of curiosity. And it would be this. For the person standing before the Iglesia de San Francisco el Grande, a question might be, why have people felt the need to build churches? Or even, why do we worship God? From such a naive starting point, a chain of curiosity. And that's important because he names this, the chain of curiosity. It's given a frame and a reference. Would have the chance to grow, involving questions like, why are churches different in different places? What have been the main styles of churches, and who are the main architects, and why did they achieve success? And only through such a slow evolution of curiosity could a traveller stand a chance of greeting the news that the church's vast neoclassical facade was by Sabatini, with anything other than boredom or despair. De Botton concludes that the nature of curiosity creates the nature of engagement and interest. If you were simply told this fact without going through what he refers to as the chain of curiosity, your information would be delivered in a despairing or bored manner. What the suggestion is the art of travel comes down to the experience of the environment around you to cause the question, to bring into the frame of reference that particular question. So just on that frame and reference, let's go back and think about what we have here. He calls it the chain of curiosity. Okay? Now that is something that we think of in terms of nomination and naming. Then we get this conclusion. Only through such slow evolution of curiosity. The key word here is only. De Botton suggests that there is no other way to develop the curious mind. So, deconstructing this, you will see what I've considered to be the important areas of concern when we make these issues. Moving on to the next section, which is very different in its manner, but it is concerned mostly and very importantly with the nature of the soul, as opposed to the scientific investigation. So there's a broadness to de Botton's sensibility as to the meaning behind the desire to travel or movement or to experience, and more importantly, the relationship of the individual with the environment, be it either enriching or be it messy and difficult. Now, both sides of that coin need to be referred to in your responses and need to be engaged with, because that is what we're asking you to do through the rubric and through assessment and exam questions. And so we start with some information about Wordsworth and the Lakes District in this particular chapter, but it gets really interesting here in the part 4. Part of the complaint was directed towards smoke, congestion, poverty and ugliness of cities, but clean air bills and slum clearance would not by themselves have eradicated Wordsworth's critique. For it was the effect of cities on our souls rather than on our health that concerned him. So I'm interested in this particular sentence because this sentence really draws in the nature of our relationship and suggests to us that there are chief concerns with individuals and the experience of the world around him. And it reminds us that the environment is not just the landscape, but the people who inhabit it. So the people who inhabit a city have an environmental consequence on that space. Their emotion must and should always inform the emotion of others who are forced to live within close confines that you are forced to do inside a city. Despite the fact that there is a lack of nature, there is a lack of light, there is a lack of clean air, it's also the presence of other people that is of great concern. Now, this is not necessarily a depressive thing, but it's a thing which suggests that the individual must go and explore and experience for an enrichment of the soul. And there's that key word, enrichment. So let's break down this particular sentence. When we look at it, this sentence has a very important word here. And that word is this. So we get the use of the word effect of cities. And this word effect reminds us of the direct, close relationship that we have. So make sure that you are speaking about the use of de Botton's language. After we go through how Wordsworth felt, we have here, it seemed harder than on an isolated homestead to begin a sincere relationship with others. One thought baffled my understanding, wrote Wordsworth of his residence in London. How men lived, even next door neighbours, as we say, yet still strangers, and knowing not each other's names. This is a constant and regular concern. De Botton then places himself in the centre of the narrative, which is constantly something that he is doing. This, he says, is his individual response to Wordsworth's problem, how he feels a kind of connection with his guide. In each one of the paragraphs, a similar technique is being used. And he says here, myself afflicted by a few of these ills, I had several months before my journey to the Lake District emerged from a gathering held in the centre of London, that turbulent world of men and things. He is therefore talking about the fact that Wordsworth poetry very much creates a meaning for him. Down a bit further, I have the redemptive power of natural forces with which so much of Wordsworth's poetry was concerned. We have here, he's talking about coming across this cloud. I attempted to photograph this cloud because it is the very essence of Wordsworth's work, and the fact that we have nature and the natural environment creating a redemptive power. When you come across words that obviously are trying to strike an emotion in a text, I do recommend that you go to a dictionary definition of them, because de Botton is attempting to use that word in that sense. So a redemption or redemptive is an act of saving someone from error or evil. Now, in this sense, you could consider, if he's talking of the soul, he is talking of a much larger concept like the word evil. But of course, we also have the idea of error, which is in itself important. The redemptive power of natural forces with which so much of Wordsworth's poetry is concerned. So Wordsworth was concerned with the fact that the natural environment can have that elusive, redemptive quality, whilst also presenting an environment that has a difficult relationship with ourselves. We must therefore pursue one and ignore the other. De Botton's cloud then presents itself to him as a herald. The cloud had floated over that part of the city only a few minutes before, and given the strong westerly wind, was not destined to remain above it long. The lights of surrounding offices lent to its edges an almost decadent fluorescent orange glow, and that word decadent's important there, making it look like a grave old man bedecked with party decorations. Soon it would be over the fields of Essex, and so it goes. Keeping my eyes fixed on the apparition, whilst walking toward the bus stop, I felt my anxieties abate, and turned over in my mind the lines that the Cadish poet had once composed in honour of a Welsh valley. Here we have the word decadent. Now, the word decadent is striking. It's reminiscent of an idea that the cloud is living a life that is beyond that of the controlling, inhabiting, and soul-destroying city. Decadence is something that one may pursue in light of working against the nature of society. Further down, you get this extraordinary, lovely oxymoron, or image of an oxymoron. A grave old man bedecked with party decorations. The sense of mortality and death, the sense of joy. Okay? The two images create a striking idea for de Botton. They give him, or the apparition, the herald, he calls it an apparition, a creature, something that brings him forward, gives him an abatement of anxiety, strengthens within him the force of nature. And so we conclude with the poem, and interestingly enough, a rather ordinary version and image of the cloud, calling us to experience this as well with our own sensibilities. If de Botton and Wordsworth have experienced it through the art of travel, then you must as well, because simply and obviously the art of photography does not quite cut it. And so we return to the assessment task, and And we suggest to ourselves, again, we have this question: people and landscapes intertwine in an enriching, yet sometimes uneasy relationship. Now, as I've suggested, that particular sentence could open the paragraph or the sequence that we have been reading, not paragraph, sorry, because it's exactly what he is discussing there. And if you explore how this relationship is represented in your prescribed text, you would explore definitely the fact that he is dealing with not only Wordsworth's sentiments, his own sentiments, but the ways in which nature and the forces of nature take on their own personified elements there to create an image that strikes meaning for the reader. And you extend on those ideas as you go.